Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future Space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Our guest today is Peter Beck. Peter is the founder and CEO of Rocket Lab. Peter, it is a pleasure to have you on the Future Space.
Oh, my pleasure to be here.
By the way, congratulations on the recent CAPTSONE launch. I know we'll come back on that. But before we go into your journey to where you are today and Rocket Lab, could you share with us 3 words that describe the essence, that capture the essence of space for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the first one, in order of priority, would have to be inspiring. I think it's very difficult to not be inspired by space and your place in the universe. And then the other way, I think, is the other word would be unfinished. I think there is a lot of work that we have to do as a company, but also humanity has to do to really seek and realize the value that space can offer us. And then I think the final word is infinite, and not just infinite as in infinite, but infinite as in infinite possibilities and infinite resources and infinite thinking. Really, I mean, it's hard to get your head around something so infinite.
Even more so now with James Webb, we just capture this image and we just get this, like, there's no end to it. Like, even if we think, even when we get to the borders of our own galaxy, we still have billions and billions of galaxies, and we can push the boundaries for a really long time before I think we get tired. Peter, there's obviously a science story of going to space. There's obviously a technology story of going to space, but beyond that, what would you say is the human story of this journey?
Well, I think humans are hard coded to explore, and you can go back through the beginnings of time with human evolution and see that humans didn't just stop at their one little spot in a cave. They ventured out and then continued to venture out, and then as technology kind of iterated along with it. As technology improves, the first thing that humans tend to use that technology for is to go explore, and I think the same is obviously with space. And a lot of people always ask me, well, why are we going to the moon, or why would we go to Mars? And I'm sure exactly the same questions were asked when explorers set off across the oceans. It's like, well, why are you leaving this continent? Well, why do you think there's another continent? But I just think it's fundamentally hard coded in the human DNA that we need to go out and explore and discover.
I think that's been one of the successes of the human species, is to somehow engineer lives' drive to constantly go to places, right? I mean, how many times have I walked on a field of lava, and then out of nowhere, I mean, you have no idea, but this sprout just like comes out of what you think would not be, inhospitable. And I've always, I mean, for me as a solo wilderness explorer, someone who has spent a lot of time in the wilderness and natural world, life has this inherent drive to go to places. And if it can't, it's not because not that it wants, but it's just because it hasn't figured it out, and it will be, it will find its way. And the humans have definitely taken that drive and engineered on top of it, and giving us the tools to always keep pushing the boundaries. And to your point, there's no one today in North America or anywhere, I mean, outside, around the world, that would not exist if it was not for previous people who had decided to go beyond the mountain, to go beyond the river, to go beyond these lands that usually, you're born in one location, but most of us, the vast majority, don't stay there. Peter, I was reading your biography, and it's really interesting. You're an engineer, and you're the CEO of a really important, one of the top rocket companies. But your father was a museum art gallery director, a gemologist, and your mother was a teacher. What would you say was their contribution to your career as an engineer and as a CEO and the founder of a rocket company?
Yeah, I mean, there was certainly no limits in the house that I grew up with. Grew up in, and you know, if any of us wanted to do anything, it was never, oh, you can't do that. It was like, okay, go for it. So I think I was super lucky to grow up in a household where there was no kind of predetermined conclusions or limits placed on us as children, and just super supportive to go out and do the things that you think are important.
Now, would your father give you the understanding of the importance of art also beyond the mechanics and the engineering and the physics and the math? Was that something that stays with you as you continued in your career?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, we were always a very strong engineering family. Although my father was a gemologist and a museum and all the rest of it, he was still, very much, an engineer. And his father before him, and then on my mother's side, there were the Smiths that you can trace their origins back to being blacksmiths. So there was always a huge engineering theme. But I'd say the one thing that was really important is lessons that I took is design can be functional, can also be beautiful. And if you look at anything that the Rocket Lab does, at least I would hope that it's functional, but also we strive to make everything beautiful as well. And whether you look at our launch vehicles or our satellites or our logos or our facilities, it's all very beautiful. So I guess in that respect, I was certainly brought up with an eye for, what looks nice and what doesn't look nice. And that's turned out to be a really, really important part of the company's culture because, generally if someone takes the time to make something beautiful, that they have pride in that. And if someone has pride in their work, then generally it actually does work from a functional standpoint.
I think that is definitely a universal need that your work is valued. And from all my traveling and eating at different tables around the world, this you have the commonality. I mean, we might disagree on a lot of things, but these needs that we have as individuals to be valued in our work, and if we find a value, then we go beyond the ask. We push ourselves more because we have a sense of connection and commitment to this work. Now, Peter, the quick question before we get into the work was your love. Which one came first? Was it the love of stars, and then it was supported by your talent as an engineer, or was it you were an engineer and then magically kind of it led to your career in the rocket world?
Yeah, I mean, my youngest memories are I've just been fascinated with space and science and engineering. So I would say that they were definitely symbiotic all the way through. And the reason why I went to do a tool and die making trade versus going to university out of school was just that need to actually engineer and create things. And always felt that having those hand skills were super important, and quite often they're hard to learn later on in life. So that was kind of some of the rationale for really running off in that direction first. But yeah, I would say, gosh, yeah, I would. One fed the other for sure. One enabled the other.
Did you spend a lot of time as a kid watching, looking up to the stars, taking long, like going camping in the backyard and just staring at the stars and wondering what was beyond these speckled specks?
Yeah, for me it's one of my actually youngest childhood memories is actually standing outside with my father looking up at the skies, and him pointing out that those were planets and they can have those are stars and they can have planets around those and there could be somebody looking back at you, and that concept I grasped really really early, and it was very very powerful, and I know some people that's not the case, and others it's instant. So for me, it was very very early on in my life that I realised that either way I was going to have something to do with space. Like that was going to be a foregone conclusion.
There's something to be said about that, the power of those physical experience, because we're getting more and more into this simulated world, right? With VR and these tools that are giving us a capacity to not physically be there, but has a simile experience. But there's a physicality to these experiences. We often talk about the overview effect, when you get to space, looking back down and experiencing this shift of awareness, seeing the Earth in context with the space. And a lot of people are trying to replicate, or at least give a certain taste. But you can have the best star show in the planetarium, right? It's what would you say about that?
Oh, look, I'll give you a real life example. So a few years back, I finally went out and bought myself a really nice telescope. I built telescopes when I was younger, and when you build a telescope, there's always compromise, especially as a young kid. You're building telescopes; they're pretty rubbish. But so I shouted myself a really nice telescope. And when I bought the telescope, I bought a nice CCD imager, and it plugs into the side of my laptop. And I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And I threw it all in the bin for the eyepiece, because you hold your laptop screen up and you look at it on a laptop, and it could just look like an image you can Google off the internet. You put your eye up to the eyepiece and you see it; it's a completely different experience. And not just for me, all my kids and our family. It was absolutely universal that the kind of the visceral feeling of looking through an eyepiece and actually witnessing something in an analog sense was just wildly more impactful than looking at something digital on a laptop screen. So it had a total service life of about 15 minutes at the Beck household. That whole digital digital sensor.
Have you and your family ever experienced the total solar eclipse?
I have, but our kids are probably too young for the last one that was down in New Zealand. But yeah, to remember it at least.
Because that was one of those events. I mean, I remember when I photographed the last one. It's one of those events that, like, between 98, 99% of totality and 100% of totality, it's almost night and day, because one, you truly can't get the feeling of why in the past they would go and try to sacrifice something, because you really feel like there's something wrong with the world, the sun, that thing, and you see you can feel the nature around you kind of like not working the way it's supposed to be working. And that physicality, again, the viscerality of life is you can't replicate that. Um, Peter, can you, I've, when I was browsing through the website, I did notice, except for the missions that are for NASA and then for DARPA, all the other names are super interesting and funny. Was that your idea? Is it your team that came with it, or what's the story behind all those?
Well, so originally we had to name the very first mission, and when you name a mission, if you call it like RL1001, as a name, then everybody that's watching that mission on a radar screen, it's tagged with that as a number, or that is the name. And we just sort of thought it would be funny that the very first missions should be exactly what it is, which is it's a test. So that on all of everybody's radar screens and documentation that's flying across, the FAA and every defence nation that's watching the launch, it is what it is. It's a test. So it just sort of, it seemed funny at the time, and rocket launches are just so incredibly all-consuming serious events that there needs to just be like one thing there that's just a little bit funny. So we kind of make light of the names and try and have a little bit of fun with that.
Do you have a favorite one, or favorite one? Some favorites?
Oh, you're not allowed to choose a favorite. Can't that's like choosing your favorite child. You can't do that. No, no. They're all fun in their own right, and I think probably the one that we got a bit carried away with was its business time, because I think if you truly Google that, you'll see it means something quite significantly different. So I think that's one we probably pushed the boundaries a little bit too far on. But but no, it's always done in good spirit, and our customers generally really love to get on board with it as well, and have a bit of fun.
Although NASA, you have to keep it serious, and DARPA, you have to.
Well, I mean, there was even the capstone. There was NASA's capstone mission, but for us, we called it a little bit further than usual. That was the internal mission name here.
Now, I just want to pick your brain a little bit. I wrote a piece about a year ago on it was called Mycelium and Rockets, and the thought behind it was back at the beginning when there was a big uproar in the media about the size of the rocket with Jeff Bezos and this narrative of men and their rockets. And after watching a movie about mushrooms, there was this moment of connection when I realized that when it comes to life seeding places, whether it's spores, mushrooms, or even on the sexual realm of reproduction in the animal kingdom, there's always seems to be a shape that is consistent. I mean, it changes, in various ways, but it's always a similar. I mean, even the mushroom. And my point was that we humans with our rockets, we were not reinventing the wheel or doing anything different than nature has been doing for millions of years. It's just that now we're about to seed the universe with life, and we're continuing this design that's been going on for even before us. Would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to our kind of exploration theme, I think there's always some controversy about billionaires spending their money developing launch vehicles and going into space. But if you look back through history, some of the greatest contributions to society and to science have been exactly from that. I mean, the very first very large telescopes were philanthropy projects by of then the day billionaires. And I look at it this is the same way. I would much rather have high net worths spending their capital on developing new technologies than governments taxing their citizens to develop those technologies. I think it's a very efficient way to create new technologies and move forward.
I mean, the billionaires have always been part of the equation of pushing those boundaries. I mean, back in the days, they were named, there were the kings and queens who could fund those expeditions that didn't have it. I mean, didn't necessarily have an economic reason at the beginning, other than than fulfilling their needs. And then I've always said that one of the biggest successes of the Renaissance in Italy is because you had billionaires who also had a vision and understood the necessity to get artists to create that vision. You have the Medicis that hired Leonardo da Vinci's and Michelangelo, and from that concentration of wealth in Italy, it spread all over the world and changed everything. So I totally agree with you that I would rather have, the rich people investing in developing. And when often people say is like, why doing that when we have other issues on the planet? And one of the arguments that I always give them back is, in the 1900s, the world had a lot of issues, diseases and health and all that kind of stuff. But Edison, Tesla, and the Wright brothers were focused on trying to power the world and fly. And there were plenty of news coverage, and people back then, they were saying there was a total waste of time to focus on like trying to fly. I mean, even their newspaper clips that says that the army was saying it was ridiculous to even think that we could fly. But what they did, the world that they created actually elevated the rest and offered solutions that no one, could have seen. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen with space. There are bigger incentives in space to be more efficient, to be, for these technologies that you don't necessarily have on the planet. And those technologies and innovations will elevate not only just the awareness and the consciousness, but also a lot of the problems that we have. I mean, is that something I'm pretty sure that you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Like all throughout history, there's always problems. So do you just stop? No. I mean, all throughout history, you keep iterating and inventing and carrying on. Doesn't mean to you need to not understand and do whatever you can, but yeah, no, I agree 100%. You have to continue to push forward and innovate.
Now, Rocket Lab, I believe you have 28 successful launches, right? Over 400 satellites. And you recently, there was a big milestone that briefly mentioned earlier, but the capstone with NASA, which is part of the Artemis. And if I remember correctly, it was not only your Electron rocket, but also your photon vehicle. And this is going to go and orbit around the moon. Can you share with us more, like the breakthrough and this milestone and what we can expect from this mission?
Yeah. So the mission for us was really broken up into two parts. So one, getting into low Earth orbit with an Electron, and then our lunar photon spacecraft spent 6 or 7 days going through a series of orbit raising maneuvers where we raised the apogee, higher and higher and higher and higher, until ultimately we achieved enough energy to do a TLI, or translunar injection. At that point, we're sending a path, onto the moon, and we separate off NASA's spacecraft called CAPTSONE, and then it carries on and goes into its own lunar orbit. And as you pointed out, it's the very first part of the Artemis program. We're returning to the moon, and it's to test out an important orbit, around the moon that is kind of both stable but also remains in communication with the Earth, because the orbit around the moon is in fact not stable. It's a very lumpy gravitational field, so it's not an easy place to kind of park up. So it was a huge mission for us. Going to the moon is no joke. The spacecraft that we had to build is incredibly complex. Had to do everything flawlessly. Generally, when you put a spacecraft in orbit, you get a few days or hours, or at least some minutes to commission the spacecraft. We didn't have that luxury or advantage. Literally, once we separated off the lunar photon, it had to do a burn pretty much straight away, and everything. It just had to turn on, lighten up, and just work flawlessly the whole time. And it's very complicated 3-axis stabilized spacecraft. Very, very hard mission. It represented, sort of 2.5 years of the team's lives and dedication to that mission. But what excites me the most about it, though, is not that it's probably about 800,000 kilometers from Earth right now. Not that. It's that what we've actually managed to create is a very, very affordable platform for going to visit the moon, asteroids, and in fact other planets. So that lunar photon spacecraft now is a platform that we can use to explore, other worlds in our solar system.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on that. I mean, because I believe you're the first company to go back to the moon. I mean, because SpaceX has not been neither. I mean, you're the first one, correct? No, or
I could be. I'm not sure. You'd have to check that, but I mean, yeah, could be.
Well, congratulations. This is super exciting. If you had the opportunity of going to the moon, would you go?
No way. No, I mean, I'm an engineer, so I know every safety factor in every system, and I have tremendous respect for astronauts who have that knowledge and experience and have that courage to make that leap. It's not the courage that I have. I would be the worst space participant in world history.
So not even the space station, like the future space station?
No, like I say, I mean, I understand the vehicles too well, and I think I'm probably more useful down here on Earth than floating up in orbit.
There's something that I truly, it's been more evident with rockets, and now that we have Perseverance and Ingenuity on Mars. If we compare again, to the age of exploration or the history of exploration before, where there was always a human cost of exploration. I mean, you read books about just when people went to Antarctica just to collect the weather, the data of weather. I mean, it was just the risks and the hardships that they went through was just absolutely crazy. But now, I mean, during the age of exploration, people would get on the boat not knowing exactly if they would survive. They would get across. They didn't have, all the necessary tools of navigations and mapping and so forth. But now we have the capacity to test in ways that don't cost the vast majority of the time human lives. You were saying how like that the vehicle that is going around the moon, a lot of work, a lot of tests, but at no point during that process was, I mean, I believe so that there were human lives at risk. Do you see how, like, the fact that now we've been able to go beyond this human cost of exploration, it will accelerate also our capacity to push those boundaries, because now we can risk a little bit more. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think we understand the risk way better than we ever have, and we can mitigate the risk way better than we ever have. But I think it's kind of a little bit of a dangerous thing to kind of think that space flight is safe, because at the end of the day, you can really mitigate those risks as best you can, and you certainly can test for them. But at the end of the day, a rocket is 2% mass of payload, and the rest is structures, and generally 90% fuel and the rest structures. And a rocket is a giant compromise. So everything is compromised against each other to reach a point where it works. The margins are incredibly slim, and those margins have not changed since the 50s when first kind of human spaceflight began. Those margins haven't changed. Like, there's no magic change in physics that has enabled it. So you can certainly it's the safest it's ever been. But I'm always cautious to just acknowledge that it's very difficult for that to ever be, right, quote unquote, safe. That's why I have such tremendous respect and admiration for an astronaut, because they know that only too well, but yet can manage and have the courage to go and do these things.
Is it in the future of Rocket Lab to at one point start to take astronauts to space?
Yeah, so the Neutron vehicle we're developing is human space rateable. It's not going to be rated for human space flight straight out of the chute, but in time, yeah, we intend to fully intend to human rate that.
And can you tell us a little bit more about Neutron, and if you're in a position to express, to share a timeline, or what's the technology and the capacity of the rocket, because it's going to be your big cargo, your big rocket. So what can you share with us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the vehicle can lift 13 tons to a downrange landing, or 8 tons return to launch site. And obviously, that implies it's a reusable first stage. It looks a little bit different to your traditional launch vehicle. What lands looks identical to what took off. So we don't dispose of the fairings or the nose cone or any of those kinds of things. And excuse me, we've been running through a reusable program for our Electron launch vehicle, and boy, have we learned a lot from that. And Neutron really feels like a little bit of a luxury to me, because generally, if you get to design one rocket in your lifetime, you're in the smallest club on the planet. But to get to do it twice is just a real treat. And taking all of the lessons that we've learned from Electron and apply them to Neutron is just a huge huge advantage for us. So as you look at Neutron as a vehicle, it looks quite different to a normal rocket, simply because it has to go up just as well as it has to go down. And those drive completely different engineering constraints and design points. So the vehicle itself, we're trying to get one out on the pad by 2024. So it's a very, very short timeline for development. and we're making great progress to that. And we announced Wallops Island, Virginia, as the launch site, and also the production factory is just outside the gate of the launch site. There's a whole bunch of things in a launch vehicle that, as I mentioned before, a launch vehicle is a giant compromise. One of those compromises is the diameter, and a lot of rockets' diameters get set by the lowest bridge between California and the Cape. That didn't seem like a good constraint to us, so that's why we built the factory beside the launch site, and hence the reason the vehicle diameter is very, very large, because we don't have those kinds of engineering constraints. So, I mean, we could spend a month just talking about every subtle design detail, but that's kind of it at the highest possible level.
Well, it's going to be. I mean, I did see the page on your website, and the design is definitely different. And you start to get into now the realm of science fiction, where these are the visions of spaceships that we used to imagine, and they're becoming a reality. We're talking about this, and we're seeing rockets that are going up and coming back, and we're seeing people, and we're seeing the now we almost take it for granted that we can launch these rockets, and people have kind of become accustomed to the fact that it's daily or weekly. By the way, when is the next launch for Rocket Lab?
It depends on our customer, but we launched a few days ago. So we launched 15 days after the moon mission a few days ago, and then I think it'll be another week or so, and we'll get another one on the pad. So what really drives our launch cadence, in fact, is our customers' readiness rather than necessarily our rockets on the pad. So that's kind of the forcing function for our cadence.
Now, I'm pretty sure that Rocket Lab has been a leader in New Zealand and in that area of the Pacific for the space industry. How is the community down there? How is the industry? Is it like, are you really kind of bringing a lot of people? You're like your own little comet, and you have your sense of gravity that it's bringing people. So could you share with us how's the community down there right now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I started Rocket Lab, there was zero space industry in New Zealand, and my original plan was to go to the US and work for NASA or for one of the the space primes. But kind of opportunities and situations presented themselves where I really decided that actually I was going to have a crack myself, and we ended up back in New Zealand primarily because of the ability to build the launch pad in the Mahia Peninsula. The private orbital launch site is super critical and key. So we've been a US company since 2013. We have about 500 people in New Zealand and about 700 people in the States. But I guess one of the things that's kind of personally gratifying is that there was just zero opportunities for a young engineer in New Zealand or even in Australia, really. To build rockets or work in the space industry. Now, as mentioned, we've got sort of 500 people down here. There's always at least 100 open positions, and the space. We have a space agency now, and it's kind of booming. So that's fun, and it's great to see now universities having space programs like none of which existed when I was growing up. And we give a fair bit back to the community. We do a lot of school visits and try and get young kids excited about science and some of the STEM subjects. And space is a wonderful tool for doing that. I think if you look at NASA, like NASA is kind of 50% there to push the limits of engineering and science, and 50% there just to inspire. And there's very few things that inspire kids and people than space has the ability to do.
The stories are absolutely amazing. I mean, with children, and talking about children, I don't know, but do you have children?
Yeah, I've got two young children. Yeah.
Do you want them to have a future in the space industry?
I hope they carve their own path in the snow. That's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean they certainly have a lot of exposure to the space industry, but like any kids, what their parents do is just not nearly as cool as you might think. So I suspect they will have prosperous careers in completely adjacent fields for sure.
Now, I mean, one could, we look at the media nowadays, and it's really easy to be doomed and have a negative perspective of the future with everything that's going on. But we continue having our children, and I think that there's a hope in that process of creating a better future. When you talk to your children, are you hopeful that they will have the skills and the capacity to create a better world, a good world?
I mean, within my own children, absolutely. I don't really prescribe to the doom and gloom of the world. I think humanity is an incredible way of sorting stuff out. Yeah, and there's crap stuff happen all the time through history. And so I guess I'm a little bit more optimistic than pessimistic. I think you have to be, quite frankly, to run a rocket company. If you were pessimistic, then it would be you wouldn't build anything. So no, I have a slightly more optimistic view of the world. I think yep, we've got some challenges ahead of us, but humanity has proven time and time again that it finds a way. To your point in the beginning, like life always finds a way. So I'm optimistic for a great future for my children and for everybody else. And I think there's some really exciting, really exciting times. And my kids can't believe that, they keep reminding me that I was born when there was no internet, and that just seems like the dark ages. So what in my children's lifetime, I'm sure, there's going to be equally, huge advancements, and the world will be a great place.
That is, I mean, I agree 100%, and that's been the foundation of my work, even with Feel the Wild, when with my book and my wilderness expeditions and writing about our journey with nature, and now telling the human story of going to space, or the nature story of going to space. But for me, I've never prescribed to that narrative of the human species being a bad species. Life is by design messy, and evolution is a messy process. Whether even just working out, your the cells of your muscles, if they want to grow, they have to kind of almost destroy themselves so that they can build. And we often talk about the butterfly, becoming our own version of the butterfly, but we forget the process of that butterfly, the caterpillar, on becoming what it was, totally turning into goo until it can fly. So, but what the human species has been good. I mean, the reason why we're about to be 8 billion on the planet is because every time that we get to those limits, it forces us to reassess what worked and what didn't work, and it gives us the incentive to push the boundaries and to go beyond. And there are a lot more people who do amazing things than people who do bad things. And I think that we have maybe, part of the failure of the environmental world has been to constantly push that button of like, we're cancer on the planet, we're bad people, we're constantly doing that. And, you have children. I've worked with children and with people. And when you keep telling people that they're bad, well, at some point, it doesn't make them inspired about moving forward. And the goal should be to move forward with acquired wisdom rather than look backward trying to blame someone, right? So, Peter, for a lot of people who like now space it's the realm of engineers, but it's all over the world. There are a lot of countries who were not connected to space, but now are connected to space. We're talking about New Zealand, who now has a space agency. For anyone who wants to participate in this new future, what will be your words of wisdom for basically anyone? Peter's words of wisdom.
Sure. Well, to find out what you're passionate about and just go for it. I think, and that doesn't necessarily apply to just space. That's what I tell every. I work with quite a lot of entrepreneurs, and find out the thing that you're really passionate about, and really passionate meaning that you'll trade just about anything to do it, and then just go and do it, and be wherever you need to be in the world to go and do it. I think the human potential is incredibly high, and life is like riding a roller coaster. There's good bits, there's bad bits. Sometimes you're upside down and you don't know where the hell you are. But there's one thing that is absolutely sure, and that roller coaster comes to an end. So, that's the way I look at my lifetime. It's like, well, I'm going to make sure that I have the most amount of fun and I can achieve the most amount of things I want to achieve with my time on the roller coaster before that thing comes to an end. And if you don't do those things, it's a life wasted. So that's always my encouragement to people is find what you're passionate about, and you'll as life finds a way, you will find a way to excel and do the things that you really want to do.
In a lot of my interviews and a lot of people I speak to, the understanding of teamwork is extremely important when it comes to space. Space cannot be achieved just by yourself. It's not. You cannot just take your backpack and go out and and do your survivor thing. It's a teamwork of many different skills, and you have a big team. You're saying you're 500 in New Zealand, 700. And what has been your biggest unexpected discovery of building a team and accomplishing the impossible on your end?
Well, I mean, I'm always blown away by the team, because you're exactly right. Like Rocket Lab is not one person, it's not a brand name. It is a collection of incredible individuals, focused on achieving amazing things. And if I look back as a company, what am I most proud of? I'm most proud of this team, because this is it's the team that actually goes to the moon. It's not as you point out. It's not one individual. It's not one anything else. So I think that is as a company, that's what I look across is the most the thing that I'm most proud of is the team that we've built, and as a result you can do great missions, but without the team.
Well, you've been building an amazing team, and I want to be mindful of your time. So we'll make sure that all the links because you're on Twitter, you're active on Twitter, Rocket Lab also, and then there's a website. And if we'll put the link if they want to look for a career at Rocket Lab. But just briefly, when you're talking about the challenges of coming back down, I always in my mind, when we were kids, I mean, I spent my teenage years in the woods climbing up trees. And the challenge in climbing up trees was never climbing up the tree. It was always trying to figure out how to get the tree without, right?
Yeah.
So that's the same.
Yeah, that's been my experience.
Exactly.
Too.
The same thing with mountains. Climbing up the mountain is part of the challenge, but most of the accidents happen on the way down because now you think that it's easier. But so, the rockets are no different. Peter, thank you so much for taking the time. It's Monday for you. It's Sunday for me. You're in New Zealand, but you split your time between New Zealand and California. So hopefully our path will cross in real life, and I'm looking forward so that we can share a meal or a bottle of wine and continue this conversation.
Love to, Daniel. That'd be awesome.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Peter, and good luck to you and the team.
Thanks very much. See you. Bye.